He sat alone in his truck, engine off, thumb hovering over the banking app on his phone. The numbers didn't lie. Payroll was due Friday, again, and he wasn't sure how he was going to cover it. Today, we're unpacking the story of a profit first case I had. This is the Contractor Success Forum. I'm Wade Carpenter with Carpenter & Company CPAs, alongside Stephen Brown with McDaniel Whitley Bonding and Insurance. Stephen, I thought we could go through a profit first case study today in hopes that our listeners might get a little value out of hearing how some of the others might have done it.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Wade. Your book is being greatly received. Hearing a case study of someone who embraced the system and has succeeded as a result of it, I think is great for our listeners to hear.
If it's okay, I'll just sort of dive into it. I'm trying to leave the names out of it. I may make up some names, I don't know, as we go. But basically, this guy, he'd already been late twice, and he knew his best guy, that one that actually made things happen, made things run smoothly for him on site. He was ready to walk on him. And his wife had told him to go find a job working for someone else more than once. And this kind of word gets around. To make matters worse, he'd taken out another one of those pay by the week loans. Those are the kinds that dig the hole deeper. Every time you think you're climbing out, you get sucked back in. But as he was sitting in his truck, came a call from his wife. The power company had left a shutoff notice on the door. I don't know if you ever heard contractors talk like that. I know they may not share those kind of things with you, but I've heard those things.
Yeah, they do. Contractors, as a rule, it does take a while to get to know anybody.
Yeah.
But going through nightmares, going through tough situations, you see it over and over again. You've been there, you know what they're going through, and you see them and you want to reach out to them. So what happened?
Well, again, I don't know if it's something that you see all the time. I didn't really see a lot of that as the auditor, but as I started working with Profit First, I'm hearing these stories. And this particular guy, let me just sort of give you some of the backstory on this. He wasn't really new to the game. He's a small general contractor, had about a 7-man crew, had a pretty decent reputation, and just a lot of our contractors, they're willing to take on almost anything to keep the cash flow churning. And he did a little light commercial, residential remodels too, but just took whatever it paid. His job ranged from maybe 50,000 to his biggest job was about 400,000. But no matter what he did, he kept chasing, like we've talked about on this podcast many times, chasing more revenue and just doing more and thinking it's just going to get there one day. But that cash flow never matched the volume that he kept reaching for. But this guy, he hadn't really taken a real paycheck in years. He draws when it was there. And this guy, they were living off his wife's salary. She was a junior high school teacher. And basically, they stayed afloat with either borrowed money, living off her paycheck. They had several years of unpaid tax bills. And basically, looking at blind hope, he was just thinking one day all this is going to fall into place, behind on not just his taxes, but behind on his sleep, working all day and night, weekends too, and barely holding that business together, as well as his marriage. It was sort of grinding on the relationship.
Yeah, and it's natural. A lot of people were raised, especially me. My father grew up in the Depression area, and you always worked your way out of trouble. That's it. If you're having financial trouble, it's your fault you're not working hard enough. And a lot of people think that way. And it's so important to work smarter, not just harder.
I do think that's a problem for a lot of our contractors. And too often we don't realize how much the financial strain puts on a relationship. Or I've said it before on here, when we are tight on money, we don't know how we're going to eat. We're not sure how we're going to put food on the table. It can make you very insecure. That insecurity really can rip your soul, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He later told me this whole story. Let me tell you how we got there. He got this shut off notice from his wife, and he's just got to do something different. He tried everything. He called one of his buddies. A lot of the contractors, I know, they'll loan money back and forth. And this guy had loaned him some money before, but he didn't have it this time. And he actually was one of my newer clients. He knew exactly what he was talking about or going through. He had been in the same boat, and he just started working with me. So he did read the original Profit First book by Mike Michalowicz, and I was introduced to this other guy. But he was telling the guy I'm talking about here, I'll call him Robert. It's for sake of the story. Robert tells him that you got to do some things different. And he was really pretty early in starting his Profit First journey, but he was already seeing a little bit of flickers of light at the end of the tunnel for himself. So he was like very all gung ho about it. And so Robert told him about Profit First and how it forced him to treat profit like a bill, not something that's left over. I know you made the comment at one time, especially when you read the book, it wasn't magic. It's not a get rich scheme, but he was finally seeing something working for him.
I think when your eyes open to hope, you have no hope. I can't imagine what the guy's wife was going through on top of trying to keep things together, the stress that this guy had and was going through. And then just seeing a light, seeing something that makes sense that you can work your way through that will work you out of these problems. To me, that's the whole interesting thing about your book. Like I said before, it's not a get rich quick scheme. If you get rich weight, it'll be because your books sell $20 a piece for millions and millions of people, which is what I hope happens. But beside that, there's nothing else you need to do to implement the system. And you know, many times we talk about in this case study, you were talking about that, the hopeless situation. They got a cutoff notice. They're going to lose the power to their house. He wasn't paying himself. They were living off of his wife's teacher's salary. So he's introduced to you and to Profit First. And then what happened, Wade?
Well, he gave him my phone number, and apparently he didn't call me for a week. He struggled and managed to hold on to his person. He paid his crew late that week. After about a week, even though he wasn't convinced, he did pick up the phone and call me. Going back to what you said, this isn't about selling books. This is about contractors finding a new path. And so this guy was at the point where what have I got to lose? So he picked up the phone, and just like I do with all my contractors I'm meeting with, I'm not going to charge you for that kind of thing. I just listen. Told him a little bit about Profit First and the main parts of the system. But I told him, if you're going to continue the way you're going, just the old saying, if nothing changes, nothing's going to change. Like the old Wayne Gretzky quote, I guess, is like, you miss 100% of the shots you never take. Anyway, I told him basically the system and what he would need to do to set up the system. So this was actually on the following Friday, but he did think on it overnight.
He's put it off for a while and he really doesn't have time to think about it. The more he thinks about it, he says, I got to try something, anything.
Yeah.
Something's got to change. I get that. It is amazing to me how many times you just try to dig yourself out of a hole when you're a contractor is to get more work, right? And then as you get more work, you're busier. And as you're busier, you're not able to see the problem in front of you. You know, that expression, you can't see the forest through the trees. You're so slammed with trying to work your way out of the problem. And the last thing you want to do is explore a new business system. What did it take for him to start buying into the system, and what ended up happening for him?
Well, he told me a lot of this later, but he lost a lot of sleep that Friday night. Saturday morning, just a lot of our contractors, he's one of those first to get up. He got dressed and went to the bank. He stood in line at the bank on a Saturday when everybody else is in there. He opened the multiple accounts, not because he wanted to, not because he really felt like this was a system. He needed to map out his money, where it was going. The job expenses account that we talked about in the book to cover the expenses that we've got for the job because we got a job. We have the operating expense accounts. He set up one for that to cover essentially his overhead and his things like his truck payments and those kind of cash flow. And then he set up these other buckets, the tax account to cover the taxes. He was trying to get out of this cycle where he was years behind on his taxes. We set up an owner's pay account so that he could finally start taking a regular paycheck and then a profit account to where he would put money aside so that there was money. And then, as I told him on the call before, you need to repurpose your income account that you've already got. Because he told me he had one of these third parties, I won't name, had his credit cards and all tied coming through there. We felt like that was the best thing to repurpose that income account. And that is a key thing that we need to point out, is that income account needs to stay alone. We don't pay bills out of there. We just accumulate it, and then we're going to split it up. But again, his books were a mess. His wife had tried to do it on the side. She hated doing it.
Yet he was supporting 7 other people. He had 7 other employees. He must have had a
Yeah.
pretty good volume.
Well, he did, but it never seemed to translate to where he had any cash to take home.
Mhm.
And again, the books and all this stuff, they thought about money constantly, he and his wife. I don't really need another reconciliation headache, but he did need to reset. And so he went there on a Saturday, and basically after all the pushback and all, he didn't really tell his wife why he did it or what he was doing. He had this overwhelming sense of he'd already gone too far and what did he have to lose? So again, we started working together. He actually came into the office and I helped him work up his initial allocation percentages. And he started trying to do it. We gave him percentages. And he ran short in his job expenses twice in the first 2 weeks. He basically had to pull from every other account, the tax, the profit that he had put aside. he did it anyway. And it's not uncommon for that to happen for a
Mhm.
contractor. You're forced into situations where you've been doing it a certain way and everybody else has their hand out. And you have to change the cycle to where you become more proactive and not feeding the cycle. I'm not saying not paying your bills, I'm saying you need to control it.
That's a real good point, and you made that in the book as well. And people make mistakes. The system is sound business principles, but also it's human related. It's adaptable to whatever situation you're in, and you see those things happen. I just applaud the fact his accounting system was a mess. His books were a mess. He really didn't know what he owed. He probably had an idea if he was billing his customer properly because he was so desperate for cash. He was constantly thinking about that. For example, if you want to lose weight, one of the hardest things to do is just to stand on those scales the first time and see where you are so you can see where you want to be. And your books are a mess. You think that's the hardest thing to get started. But Wade, that's one thing I liked about the book. It's very clear in how you can get started in the most fundamental way. And like you were saying, there was just a cycle of dysfunction around how he was running his business. And when that happens, nothing good's going to happen for you.
Yeah. This was 3 or 4 years ago. I hadn't changed the system like I have now, but this guy, it's not uncommon for somebody to start 2 or 3 months, month after month. It felt like he was treading water. He kept slipping back into these old patterns. And then there was another missed paycheck. And he came home one Thursday night and his wife wasn't there. And she had packed up the kids and went to her mother's house that was about 4 hours away without telling him. And he was sat there again thinking he's going to lose not only his company, but his family. So that's when he came back and talked to me, and we had a lot harder conversation. He called me that Friday morning and we talked for almost 2 hours. This time we dug into his true overhead. He was fooling himself, not really using the operating percent that it really took. I told him not to just look at your P&L because your P&L is not the real cash going out. It's not including notes payable, the truck payments, the mini excavator he couldn't afford, all this equipment he just had to have that was going to pay off one day. But this time he listened to me. He was running through a lot of people and he felt like he couldn't lose anybody. He cut loose 2 employees that weren't pulling their weight. He sold off a couple of pieces of equipment that he wasn't using. And more important, he recommitted to the system. We went through this is what your job expenses are really costing, and this is what you need to be bidding with
Mhm.
this operating expense. He stopped chasing every job and he started bidding with margin in mind, not desperation.
That's just one of the most key points, Wade, of the whole system. Are you bidding the job properly? Are you bidding it? Do you know what your true costs are? How you implement profit first system and how you buy into it, you have to understand the fundamentals of it before you understand the importance of calculating and understanding what your true costs are and what you should be bidding for work. And if you don't do that, you're just constantly bidding over and over again in a situation with the wrong numbers. And it's just getting harder and harder, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this guy was at a point where he finally understood that just chasing cash, taking unprofitable jobs just to get cash flow. But I get it. We hear that all the time. Just got to have a job just to keep things going. But after he did this, change didn't come overnight. He wrecked the system again one more time. I'm being completely honest here. He had 1 month where he paid every Friday and he basically budgeted for the month, but he had 5 payrolls. And so he ended up having to skip his allocations and almost dipped into his tax account again. But this time he sort of stopped himself and later told me it's funny, but he was scared to admit to me he didn't want to disappoint me. That's one of the things that I find about this is like the accountability piece. Yeah, you
Mhm.
can read the concepts, but having somebody to keep from blowing it again. In this case, I thought it was sort of poetic, but eventually, he started taking that steady paycheck. He only really missed that 1 week, and then he made it up the following week. So his wife did come back after a couple of weeks. It was in the summer anyway,
Mhm.
so she was not teaching in school. But within about 4 months, things started evening out. And by month 9, he had cut his debt almost in half.
Wow.
And that's what I feel like was so incredible about this whole thing. It did take some doing, but it actually took him almost 2 years to get him to where I wanted him to be with the target allocation percentages.
Mhm.
But now, 3.5 years later, his income taxes are all current. his debt's almost gone, and he's put down a sizable down payment on a brand new house in the last 2 weeks. This guy has finally found his path, and that's what the goal of it is here. Can you find your path to finding profitability? Sometimes these contractors are saying there's no other path and I have to bid this. But one of the big points here is if you don't know that's costing you in cash, you're probably spinning your wheels.
It just amazes me when you hear that story. The stress is incredible, and you want your problem to be over overnight. And that's an impossibility. You think about how long it took him to run himself into this much trouble, how many years, versus 2 years to virtually get out of this horrible cycle he was in and start bidding jobs profitably. Not to mention enjoying the work that he's doing again, being able to enjoy the time he's able to spend with his family as well by not just constantly being like a hamster running on a wheel, just chasing work as hard as you can. And then saying, I'm doing everything I can for this family. I'm doing everything I can. I'm killing myself over it. So you need to appreciate that and understand that. But at the same time, it wasn't until he hit absolute rock bottom that he realized that this change had to occur. Isn't that always the case with a lot of folks? I know it is with me.
Yeah. And it didn't take 2 years to really get to there. Within 4 to 6 months, it was taking a steady paycheck and things improved. But what I'm saying is, where he wanted to be and all that stuff, he finally is at the point where he's got a business he can be proud of. Every contractor goes to trade organizations or whatever, and nobody wants to admit how much debt they've got or, they're not really taking home a regular paycheck. But the moral of the story, I don't know, this guy did not win the lottery. He didn't double his revenue. He just stopped pretending growth would save him and started managing the work he already had.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like a good building, a solid foundation, a clear blueprint, sometimes you may have to fix some things along the way. Again, I've seen more often than not, people try to do this on their own and do their own little way. I guess the point is paying attention to the book, what I've said in the book, getting some accountability. That really can go a long way to getting these things straight and getting some advice to shortcut this process if you can. That's my thought.
That's a great point, Wade. It's a great story and it's a great system. Maybe instead of profit, like we were talking about, the title might lead you to believe that there's some element of magically getting rich with this business system. And maybe ought to, instead of a get rich quick scheme, it ought to be a get out of debt quick scheme. Because you truly become a slave of things that you don't understand. And situations hurt you. Certain debt that can be managed and can be used for growth and making more money is certainly reasonable. That's not the issue. The issue is what's controlling your expenses to get your work done. And are you taking money out of your company to support your family? And if you're not, why aren't you working for someone else? Why? And that's it. Well, because you felt like you could do things better, right? You could probably make more money on your own doing your own thing. And you can. But this is something you have to pay attention to and consider. I think the book's $20 on Amazon, and I think most people can afford that. Read it, think for yourself. Does this make sense? Is this something that maybe I ought to do and get started on? Wade, it's a great story, and as always, you like a happy ending. That his wife came back to him. He's reduced his debt, and he's looking to a bright new future for himself and for his family and for the people that work for him and for doing good work for his customers and regaining his reputation. Touchdown. This is great.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for that. And the shameless plug for the book, but it's not really about the book. Construction can be very lucrative and it can provide a great life for you. But if you're not getting where you want to be, you're not alone. That's one of the things I would say. But if you're hearing your own story and all this, reach out to me. I mean, don't wait for that shut off notice or tax levy or something like that, or one of these family fights. Take some steps to move forward. Let's talk. Believe it or not, I guess one thing I should probably talk about is we're setting up some group coaching around this so that people can get a little cheaper way of getting some accountability. So I am putting together a coaching group. You can find it at profitfirstconstruction.com and sign up on the wait list. We're starting probably late July, but it's only $495. Get coached in a group setting and get some real help to getting this moving forward. I know this has been a little different podcast for us telling a story like this, but we hope you enjoyed it.
So if someone gets the book and wants to be part of your test group, what do they need to do?
Just go to profitfirstconstruction.com. I think we had something like 13 slots left last time I looked out of 20. So, this is $495. It's a one-time only kind of deal because we're sort of trying to polish this up, sort of beta
Okay.
group. But again, this is accumulation of years of working with contractors and having stories like some of these things don't go immediately right. Sometimes people don't follow the system, but when they follow the system and they finally get there, I've seen some tremendous turnarounds as well as in my own business. So I appreciate you letting me explore this today. I don't know what our listeners think about the story concept, but I had fun telling it. With that said, I love your comments, thoughts. Put them in the comments below. We appreciate it if you share, subscribe. It always helps us out. We do this every week, so we'll see you on the next show.